Our guests and visitors, give them a great big hand. Thank you so much. Now, let me just kind of give you some guidelines on how we handle this. Sunday nights is very informal. It's more of an interactive service, so feel free to ask questions, to share with us your point of view, and challenge, debate, whatever, bring up your points and so forth. And if I disagree with you, just remember you have the right to be wrong. It's okay with me. But we're just so glad you're here tonight. I do warn you, we go on a lot of bunny trails. But they're fun bunny trails. You can ask any question about anything, things that may be even taboo in other churches, because we feel that we have a right to know, and instead of just going out there into the world and finding it on the Discovery Channel or National Geographic, that we should be the answer people. We should have the answer and so forth. And so we may bring out some scriptures that you may disagree with, or that it may challenge your religion, and that's okay. But we're not trying to introduce a doctrine of the devil or come up with something like that. What we'll do, like I always do, is give you another perspective. Most of the angles that I'll come at is we're not Messianic Jews, but I do show you this is what the Jews believe, but it's not being taught in Christian churches. If you're familiar with Perry Stone and some of those ministries, he does the same thing. And so what we'll do is we'll bring some stuff out. Anytime throughout the session, if you'd like to get a refill on a food or drink item, please do so. Is too silly, too dumb, or anything like that. And when we take a break, I go on break too. Don't come to me with your question on my break time, okay? So we're going to go ahead and get started. So one of the things we normally do is, does anybody have it? It's also known as the dispensation of angels. It is not primarily taught in most Christian or denominational churches, but it's also called the gap theory. And the reason being, in the book of Genesis chapter 1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Then in verse 2, and the earth was without form and void. The word was is the Hebrew word, which means became. So the earth became into a chaotic state. We showed you that God does not create chaos first and then goes back and redoes his work. Okay? So something had to happen in order for the earth to become into a chaotic state. We talked a little bit about Isaiah chapter 14, Ezekiel chapter 28, where Lucifer, we showed you in the scriptures, where Lucifer was in charge of this planet, okay? And we read the scriptures, we read it in the Bible, that he destroyed the world that then was. He destroyed nations, he destroyed cities, he destroyed kingdoms, and he destroyed its people. So there was an existence before you and I came along, okay? And so when we read in Genesis chapter 1, it is not the actual creation process, okay? It is a remodeling process, because God told Adam and Eve to replenish the earth, okay? And the word replenish means to stock it up again, to refill it, if that's what replenish means. Is that true? Yes. So what happened to the first civilization? So if we can ascribe to the gap theory, the anti-chaotic theory, the dispensation of angels and so forth, then now, as Christians, we can explain the disappearances of dinosaurs. Did anybody just recently see in the news this week that they found a 50,000-year-old cub, like a saber-toothed tiger cub? Who saw it? That they're wanting to get its DNA and clone one.
Yes.
Okay? That was this week's news. So we know we have physical, we have archaeological evidence of, hold on just a second, of something that wasn't existent before us. And so most Christians can explain dinosaurs. Most Christians can explain ancient megalithic structures and how they got built and so forth. But if you ascribe to the doctrine that, at one time there was a dispensation, we call it the Jurassic era, that there was a time before Adam and Eve, because God told Adam and Eve to replenish, and then God also told Adam to keep the garden. The word keep is a Hebrew word which means to guard and protect it. If you're living in perfect paradise, why would you need a warning to protect the garden? In Genesis chapter 3, we see Satan, we see the serpent coming onto the scene and so forth, and he's already in a fallen condition. He's already fallen from Lucifer to being, what we would dub the serpent and so forth. So they're hanging the scripture up several times, because in the book of Genesis, the word create is only used about 3 times, but every other time He starts drilling. So what do you think of the football game? The world that then was, and then he brought in Adam, but then God destroyed that world as it existed, and he saved it through Noah. We know God is going to destroy this world as we know it, because in the book of Revelations it says, God said, behold, I create a new heavens and a new earth. So things that we know are going to be destroyed. There are some theologians who ascribe that this is about the fifth go-around. Okay? Now I want you to notice something. It says, now these are the generations of the heavens and the earth. So there's a story. Generations is a story. There's a story for heaven and there's a story for earth. Now let's take a look and see what it says. These are the generations of the heavens and the earth. Everybody say heavens. Now why does it say heavens? Because you and I know, according to the Apostle Paul, that there are three heavens. There are the heavens, the outer atmosphere. There's the heavens, the solar system. And then there's the heaven where God dwells. The heavens and the earth, okay, when they were created. So it's talking about the actual time of creation. All right? So we know that the earth is older than 6,000 years old. So we talked a lot about that, okay? In the day that God made the earth and the heavens. So when it says that he made the earth in a day, the word day is the Hebrew word yom, and it literally means a 24-hour period. There are some theologians say that the 6 days of creation are actually 6,000 years of creation, and that's not what it's talking about. Not according to the Hebrew definition. Anybody ever hear that? 6 days? All right, so that is a blanket of theology that's out there. Now, Genesis chapter 2, verse 4, Message translation. This is the story how it all started, okay? Heaven and earth when they were created. So I put in here, Bible students, take notice. You need to read the Bible, not your religion. Okay, I tell people all the time, if you have a denominational background, we tend to read our Bible through a denominational background or what we think it's saying based upon what it actually says. All right, in verse 5. Now, verse 5 is going to mess with your doctrine. And every plant of the field, now listen, before it was in the earth. Every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew, for the Lord God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, okay? And there was not a man to till the ground. So this is the story of the earth in its previous generation. Let's break it down, see if we can make sense of it. It says that God put all the vegetation in the earth before man showed up. Does everybody see that? He put all the vegetation in the earth before man showed up. Lucifer was in charge at one time. Isaiah 14. He destroyed that planet. After, we don't know how long the planet stood in a place of judgment. We're going to cover that as well. And then God returns back on the scene. And so God creates man. He creates the sun and the moon. But everything else that we think is creation is not a creative word, because he said, let the earth bring forth the vegetation. And here in Genesis chapter 2, verse 5, it says before man ever came along, that was already in the earth. So when you read Genesis chapter 1 and you think, well, look, this is the day that God created the vegetation, that's not what it's saying. Because Genesis 2:5 says there's another story behind that, and the Jews understand this. This is the pre-Adamic race. That this vegetation was in existence before Lucifer ran the planet into the ground. And so because the world, the planet, came into a place of punishment, we're going to talk about that, okay? Then the vegetation survived the flood, because Genesis chapter 1 is called Lucifer's flood. The planet is already flooded. God doesn't create a flooded planet and then do something with it. Because we showed you God's building pattern or creative pattern. Every time God created something, he said, it is good, it is good, it is good. We showed you in Jeremiah that everything God created is perfect and in all its ways. So God doesn't create chaos and then go, whoops, let me go ahead and fix that. So it doesn't make sense to the nature of God and his creation. And here it's telling us that before man ever showed up, okay, before it ever rained or anything, before the mist was there, that the seeds were already in the earth. Does everybody see that? Yes. Because that's what it says. And every plant of the field before it was in the earth. was created by God. Are y'all still with me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, it's very quiet. You're scaring the preacher. Okay? So the plants were there before in the soil. So when you read Genesis chapter 1 and God says, let, He's allowing what He had already put there originally to return. It's giving permission. Does the word let not mean, is that not permission?
Yes.
Okay. So I challenged you last session, count how many times the word let is used in Genesis chapter 1 in comparison to how many times you read the word created. Okay, the word created is only used 3 times, about 3 times in Genesis chapter 1. We know He created the whales, okay, during this go-around, but it gives the impression that there were no whales during the Jurassic era. So let's go a little bit further. Any questions so far? Clear as mud?
Yeah.
All right, so let's go on. So God created the vegetation before it was in the earth. Something happened to the planet. Okay, we know, if you've been with us for a while, we know that was part of Lucifer's rebellion. When Lucifer rebelled, in Isaiah 14 it says he destroyed the world that then was. Then we read unusual scriptures where it says that the earth was in the water and out of the water. Okay, and so we see that the earth was put into a judged and so forth, so it was placed in darkness and it was placed in water. Remember in the book of Leviticus, the Levitical law, that if a vessel becomes unclean, it's placed in water for purification. So we don't know how long the earth was sitting underwater.
Wow.
And so now you have the earth in the coldness of space sitting in water. There's no source of light because God said, let there be light. And then He creates on the 4th day the sun and the moon. So now we have the planet sitting in the coldness of space with no source of light. So scientists call this that there was an ice age. Okay? A mammoth, a woolly mammoth with a buttercup in its mouth, it froze what's called a flash freeze. It froze to death. Why is it we're finding some discoveries and so forth where things just froze instantly? Anybody see those in the news? Okay, National Geographic has made stories about it. So we have archaeological evidence of things that just what we would call as flash freezing. Where would that flash freeze come from to cause a woolly mammoth to be frozen instantly? God removed the light, God removed the source of warmth, and God put it in judgment. Are y'all still with me?
Yes.
Is everybody still saved?
Yes.
Turn somebody at your table and say, Jesus is Lord. All right, let's go to Genesis chapter 1, verse 17. Then God said, let the land sprout with vegetation. This is the New Living Translation. I'm on the bottom of page 16. Let the land sprout with vegetation. Every sort of seed, okay, bearing plant, and trees that grow seed-bearing fruit, these seeds will then produce the kinds of plants and trees from which they came. And that is what happened. So God said what? The King James Version, He said, let the earth bring forth. The Message translation says, let the land sprout. So is He creating vegetation at that time? No, He's giving permission for it to return. The miracle behind that is when God said let the vegetation return, there's a possibility that it grew up to a full, and that's perfectly fine. Genesis 1:11, the Message translation says this. It says, God spoke, earth, green up, grow all the varieties of the seed-bearing plants, every sort of fruit-bearing tree, and there it was. Now, we have been traditionally taught that on the day of creation, when God is creating this stuff, that He made all the individual blades of grass, He made the trees, He made the bushes, He made the cactus. Is that what we've not been taught? But this is not what it's saying. We have ferns that they say are thousands of years old that match archaeological finds of ferns that existed during the Jurassic era. Anybody ever see that?
Yes.
So we have ferns that are hundreds of thousands of years old, and then God told it you're allowed to return. What's He doing? He's lifting off judgment. Genesis chapter 1, verse 11. God spoke in the earth. Genesis 1:12, King James Version. And the earth brought forth grass. Is He creating grass?
No.
Who brought the grass?
The earth.
The earth. How can the earth bring grass? Because in Genesis chapter 2, we read earlier that before it was in the earth, God had already created it and then put it into the earth. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding, or if you're Texan, herb. How many of you say herb? Okay, you don't say Houston, do you? All right, let me not go there. All right. The herb yielding seed after its kind, and the tree yielding fruit, okay, whose seed was in itself after his kind, and God saw that it was good. So the earth brought forth. He did the same thing with the sea. Let the seas be filled, right?
Yes.
Okay. So in Genesis, so there are two, like I said, two major floods in the Bible. Genesis chapter 1, the Luciferian flood. Genesis chapter 7, Noah's flood. And both times he told both male species replenish. The word re means to populate it again. In Noah's time it makes sense, but when we're taught it in traditional Christian setting, when God told Adam to replenish the earth, nobody pays attention that there may have been an existence, a civilization that lived before Adam and Eve. And this may be why God came on the scene and said, this time, let's create a species called man in our image. And the difference is, we're going to make him spirit, soul, and body. So it makes you wonder what was in existence beforehand. Genesis chapter 2, verse 5. And every plant of the field before it was in the earth. Okay? So this is talking about part of the generations of the earth. That there's a story that happened to this planet before we read about it in Genesis chapter 1. When we read Genesis chapter 1, or the first 5 books of the Bible, which the Jews call the Torah, you and I are getting the cliff notes. We're getting the short version. We're not being taught everything that the Jews have taught as far as the Torah is concerned. And so therefore, we've come across some situations as Christians where we can't explain certain things. How does a Christian, my pet peeve, how does a Christian mother tell her son about dinosaurs? How does a Christian, you're at work with the guys and they say, well, what do you think about dinosaurs? How do you explain it? How do we explain ancient megalithic structures? Okay? How do we explain the phenomenon of UFOs and aliens? Are you getting any of this?
Oh, yeah.
How do we explain some of the mysteries of the earth? Christians can't. And so because we can't, because it's not being talked about, we are made the laughing stock of the world. Are you getting any of this? There's photographic evidence. Okay? There's archaeological evidence, and Christians can't explain it. And so because we can't explain it, okay, the Discovery Channel is bringing possibilities. And like I've shared, in times past, that the new theory of evolution is not that man, evolved from apes and so forth. The new theory of evolution is that aliens created man and placed us here on this planet. Is that not the new theory of evolution?
Yes.
That's what's coming about on the TV. So what man couldn't explain in the beginning and could find no theory of, he came up with another theory. Are y'all still with me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now let's take a look at some verses and see what kind of trouble we can get into. Let's go to page 20. Any questions, guys?
No, sir.
Is it making sense? Okay, and again, like always, do not take my word for it. If you go to church and you take the preacher's word, I have a song for you. Dum, 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 dum. Always check it out for yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, like in the book of Acts, be like a good Berean. Search these things to see if they be true.
Right.
You may agree, you may disagree, but how many of you know if we disagree, that doesn't mean we have to get a divorce? Okay? Now, in Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 23, Jeremiah is having a vision. Oh, wait a minute. I skipped a part, didn't I? Yes, I sure did. Hold on, just a second. Everybody say, Pastor John, get the program. See, you had no trouble there, repeating that after me. Get the program. First, 2 Peter, let's go to page 18. 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 3. According to the divine power, hath given unto us all things that provided dirt for the plants before he allowed the plants to come forward. God provided the atmosphere before he allowed the birds to fill it. God allowed the waters to be existent before he brought aquatic life. So this is called provision, providing for the vision. So that means that anytime, through anything that you go through personally as a believer, that you may think God has forgotten you. Anybody ever feel that way? Hello, hello, hello? Lord, 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 where? But he hasn't. He's already provided, because that's what it says in 1 Peter 1:3. That God has given you everything that pertains to life and godliness. You are well taken care of. All you have to do is put in your request. Father, in the name of Jesus. And that's it. Now, let's go to Genesis chapter 2, verse 5 and 6. Neither wild plants nor grains, okay, were growing in the earth. The Lord God had not yet sent rain to the earth. Okay, this is where the mist canopy is coming from. Had not sent the rain to the earth, okay, and there were no people to cultivate it. So God's original design for the planet was to have people to cultivate the earth. Why? Because God, at heart, is a farmer. He likes bringing fruition to things. What did Jesus say should happen in your life? His desire is that you bear much fruit. Not that you become fruity, but that you bear much fruit, okay? So, said it had not sent rain upon the earth. And I think that Adam ever had to worry about the face of the water. What is covering the planet? Water. What is in the cosmos? Darkness. Darkness. When God let there be, it's always used for punishment. Okay? Questions, comments, smart remarks. Are you learning?
Yes.
Let's go a little bit deeper.
Pastor.
Yes.
Jared.
Yes, sir.
The blackness you were talking about, so dark they could feel it. Would you say it would be the equivalent of a black hole in space?
I would say, in a sense, no, because what we know of black holes, a black hole is a vacuum that sucks it all in. As far as a black hole sucking in whole galaxies or universes, I'm not aware of anything like that, but there's a possibility. You know, sir.
Some theories are that it was a volcano and there was the ash blocked out the sun during the Egyptian. So that would cause the darkness.
Okay.
Not that.
If you weren't here, turn with me to Exodus chapter 12, verse 12. If you have a Bible, Exodus 12:12. And let's do that. Thank you for bringing that up. Exodus 12:12. Can somebody with a good loud voice read King James Version? Exodus 12:12. Yes, anybody? Are you there? How many of you have a Bible? How many of you brought your Bible?
I'll read it.
Thank you. Thank you.
It says, "For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and it will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord."
Okay. Exodus 12:12. Did you catch the last part? That the things that happened in Egypt was against man and the gods. It says man and gods. And so the 10 plagues of Egypt were also against the 10 gods primarily ruling the land of Egypt. And the reason that God caused the death angel, Apollyon or Abaddon, to 1 Corinthians chapter 10, and according to Revelations, the death angel, to pass across the land and kill all the firstborn of males, humans and animals, is because according to Levitical law, that the first male that passes through the womb, that the Bible calls it coming through the matrix, the first male that is born already belongs to God. And so these Egyptians were dedicating their firstborn to other gods. And so God wiped out all the firstborn males of man and animals because it was a smear in the other god's face. Does it not say in Exodus 12:12 that it was a contest between man and gods?
Yes.
So everything that you read there, the plagues are against not only against man as judgment, but to show the other gods that he was in charge. So if it was a contest of the gods, now we have a difficult time with that word gods. It's little g, not big G. If there was a contest of Jehovah God, showing that he is the God of gods, he's the King of kings and the Lord of lords. He's the Alpha and the Omega. He's the creator. He's not a created one. Then God is fighting the other gods and showing them, I have supreme power over these people and over your powers. And when I remove my people out of the land of Egypt, one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to write down a memo. And the first thing I'm going to say is, you shall have no other gods before me. First commandment out of the 10. So God is acknowledging of authority. Okay? Yes, sir.
What's your theory on the reason why God?
Inclination as a people to turn towards evil. That the righteousness, why do you think that God be? If you want to talk about them, if you want to go on a smear campaign, if you want to gossip, if you want nothing, we can do that. Who taught him that? According to the Okay, let's dig a little bit deeper. Isaiah chapter 13, verse 10. I'm on the bottom of page 19 in the study guide. For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. And I will punish the world for the evil. And what is God using to punish the world? Darkness. This is talking about the tribulation period. Can I ask you a question? How do you tell the sun not to shine? Because this is what Isaiah is saying. That he's telling the sun, the galaxies, the cosmos, do not shine on planet Earth. And this is during the tribulation period. Didn't we just read in Isaiah here? It says he's going to tell the moon, you're not allowed to shine on the earth. Didn't it say here in Isaiah that during the tribulation period he's going to tell the stars, you're not allowed to shine on the earth? How do you tell constellations, planets, solar systems, and galaxies and stars, you're not allowed to shine on the earth? Is this what it's saying?
Yes.
It's going to happen during the tribulation period. Is that correct? So why would we not think in Genesis chapter 1 that God used the same method of punishment on an earth while it was in darkness? There was no light upon the earth, and God said, let there be light. So when he says, let there be light, then, is he talking to the cosmos? Cosmos, I now give you permission, okay, to shine upon it again. Does everybody see that? Because how do you tell the sun, stop shining? Sir?
Could that be in relation, or is there any relation between that and John chapter 1 where it's talking about Jesus is light and he was there in the beginning? And
Okay, that's a good point. One of the things that I would go more through church history with that one, because between the book of Malachi and to the New Gospels, there were 400 years of darkness. Nobody was hearing anything from God. Nobody's getting revelation and so forth. And then Jesus came, and it says he was the light of men, and he lit up the world and so forth. So that would be one aspect of it. But I think that's another aspect, because if you think about one of the things that we've taught here is Lazarus died. How many days did Jesus wait for before he went to go see Lazarus? 4 days. What was created on the fourth day? Light, the sunlight. So you have to have S-U-N, sunlight, in order to have biological life, and we have to have S-O-N, the sun's light, in order to have spiritual life. So that would be another way of looking at it. So it's a good point, something to look into. I agree with that, definitely. Sir?
Earlier you said that God and Lucifer didn't have a wager. I thought in the Bible they made a deal saying I can tempt man, and God told him that otherwise. I thought that wasn't
More than likely you got that out of the book of Job, but it wasn't a wager. In the book of Job, God is actually bragging on Job. And Job is the oldest book in the Bible. He's actually bragging on Job. He said, have you considered my servant Job? Okay? He's a man without guile. I mean, the brother is living it right. That's why he's so stinking prosperous. Okay? And so Satan begins to countermove and say, well, you've got a protective hedge around him. But because he's got a protective hedge around him, why did he have a protective hedge around Job? Because he was living right before God. So it wasn't really a wager. God was just putting, can I say it like this? He was putting his faith in Job because he knew that Job wouldn't turn from God, even though Job lost everything. Because in the book of Job, chapter 9, we find out one of the reasons Job went through a lot of things that he went. I have no daysman between me and God. The word daysman is another way of saying having an umpire. This is why Jesus became our high priest, our umpire, our referee, our advocate. Okay? And then another reason, why did all this transpire? Why did all this happen to Job? In the book of Job, it tells us where Job says, the thing which I feared the most has come upon me. So not only was he following God because he was a righteous man, but he was also following God because of an unhealthy fear of God. There's a difference between fearing God and having a healthy respect for him, and fearing God thinking he's just going to smite you and he's out to get you, because there's some Christians who believe that God's out to get them and he's trying to punish them and trying to show them something. Well, God's trying to teach me something with this sickness. Well, bozo, don't go to the doctor and learn your lesson. If God's trying to teach you something with the sickness, don't go to the doctor, or else you're not going to learn the lesson. So I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but people, they're not paying attention to what they're doing. So there's several things that happened with Job and so forth. It wasn't a wager. God was just bragging on Job. And so, he told him, okay, I'm going to prove my point. Job's my man.
It's like an old Pentecostal thing, because I was raised in a Southern Pentecostal church. That's what we were taught.
Okay.
God and Satan had a wager to tempt mankind. That's the only reason God lets Lucifer get away with it.
No, the thing that Lucifer, number one, the reason that Lucifer gets away with what he gets away with is very simple. When Adam fell, what did Adam do? He gave his authority. Okay? Adam became ruler of the planet. On day was created. And so Adam did something that most churches don't say, but he committed high treason.
Right.
Because when Eve partook of the fruit, the Bible clearly says that Adam was with her. He didn't say anything, he didn't do anything. He didn't stop it. So even though Eve was moved by deception, Adam, because he knew better, committed high treason. And he handed that authority over to Satan. So Satan went back to his original status. What is Satan called in the Bible? The god of this world. So if Satan is the god of this world, and he comes to kill, steal, and destroy, now you understand why this world is in the condition that it's in.
Yes.
Okay? So you and I, the Bible now says, and we've talked about this before, we are ambassadors.
Yes.
What does an ambassador do? Okay? When the Spanish ambassadors came to the United States and so forth, what is an ambassador's job? Number one, if we have our ambassadors in foreign countries, our ambassadors are not subject to their laws. We live above the law. We're not subject to the laws of this planet. We don't have to have sickness, illness, and disease and death and all that stuff. Hold on just a second. Okay? We're ambassadors. What does an ambassador do? An ambassador goes into a new territory, takes that territory for the kingdom they represent. They introduce a new language. They introduce a new monetary system. They introduce a new way of thinking. That's what an ambassador does. So our monetary system is not, get a good education and go to college and climb your way to the corporate ladder. Our monetary system is on sowing and reaping. Yes. Tithes and offering. That's our monetary system. That's our currency. Okay? Our language is the language of love. The way that we take over our territories, we do things by faith. We're ambassadors. Everywhere you go, you're to take that territory. So if you're an ambassador for Christ and you got a job, and you're thinking, why did God put me in this place with all these heathens? Because it's your job as an ambassador to convert the heathens, not to complain about how bad they treat you. Okay? That's what an ambassador does. An ambassador will always meet resistance because people don't want change. But in the book of John, chapter 3, verse 16, 17, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish. But it tells you that the world loves darkness, and their deeds are in darkness. But Jesus didn't come to condemn them. Right. So as an ambassador, we go into places where we are rejected. We represent the kingdom in hopes that they'll turn around and receive our king. Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering if darkness is used for punishment. Is the punishment God removing himself because
removing his
the
presence and his goodness?
Okay.
But that's not the only thing, because I got a teaching. I was thinking about teaching it on Wednesdays after Pastor Karen's through, is that God also hides in darkness. And sometimes we go through things that we think, God, where are you? And God is hiding in darkness. He's still with you. He's watching you go through it. Why is he watching you go through it? Well, you're my son. You're my daughter. I'm watching you go through it. I know you need me there, but I know you can do it. It's time for you to fly.
To build your faith.
To build up your faith. Okay? You will never grow strong and mature if you don't go through stuff.
Amen. That's right.
Okay? Okay? Trees always grow their roots the deepest during a storm.
Wow.
And so you will never grow strong in the Lord unless you're going through something. So when you're going through something, it's at that time that God knows you have already passed the test. You don't know because you're going through it. So you think, God, what is happening? Where are you? And God is saying, you're going through a test. Apply everything that you know about my word. When you're in school, whether you're in college or in grade school, if you remember, when you went through the test, was the teacher there to answer your questions? No. You were tested to apply what you know, what you've been taught. So if you've been taught the word of faith, if you know how to use faith, if you know how to operate in faith, God says, I'm going to promote you. Here's a test. And God doesn't expect us to fall apart and stay at home and hide out. God expects us to apply everything we've been taught.
Amen.
Oh yeah, I remember Pastor John said, that man gets on my nerves. But he said, I need to speak words of faith. I can't be grumbling and fussing and cussing and flipping people off. Oh, reminded you of something. Okay, good.
Doesn't Jesus say that one of the disciples cursed a lot?
Peter.
Yeah.
Peter was a hothead.
And even though he was a hothead, Jesus said he's one of my favorites.
He became the CEO of Jesus' ministry. Who cut off Malchus's ear?
But-
Can you, hold on just a second, guys. This is not a bar. Hold on just a second. Okay, think about this. Can you imagine Jesus being arrested, and Peter, the hothead, pulls out his sword, which means that it is legal to have a license to carry. Pulls out his sword, cuts off Malchus's ear. Can you imagine Jesus' response? Peter, what'd I tell you about that? Picks up the ear and puts it back. Okay? He was a hothead. Peter was a hothead. He cursed like a sailor because he was a sailor. But Jesus used him anyways to become the CEO of his ministry, take over his ministry. How do we know that? The book of Acts, on the day of Pentecost, Peter stood up and preached.
But doesn't necessarily mean that even though you curse a lot, you
No.
will send you to hell?
Jesus knew the character of the man, that he was willing to die for what he believed. And he knew that Peter was willing to die for what he believed, so he became the CEO.
That is good.
Do you think it will send you to hell, though, being like Peter in that sense?
Well, I don't think you should go around cussing every day thinking, I'm just the Apostle Peter. No, because the Bible tells us about speaking profane things and so forth. You know, if something slips out, that's fine. If you're having a moment, I think God will forgive you. But I wouldn't F-bomb everything, on a daily basis. Because you know what you're doing. And most people, if you think about it, and I've taught the churches for years, that when somebody who cusses a lot, it's a weak mind trying to be strong.
Yes.
Because they can't find anything intelligent to say. And so we cuss. Okay? Why do we cuss? We're mad. Why are you mad? Why do people get mad? You didn't get it your way. You didn't get it your way, so you're cuss. That's it. So this is the source of anger. It didn't go my way. It's not what I thought. Okay? So what does that mean? That means that part of your life, since it didn't go your way and you just had a cussing fit, that part of your life has not been surrendered to Jesus.
Amen.
He's your Savior, but He's not your Lord. Because Lordship means I own you. You've been purchased with a price. And the Bible tells us not to speak profane things or to have vulgarities come out and so forth. So we can't justify it because Peter did. Jesus chose Peter because He knows this is a man who will die for what he believes in, and Peter did. Was he not crucified upside down?
Yep.
Okay, because he was unworthy to be crucified, like the Messiah. Okay, so God, what does the Bible say? God looks at the heart. We look at other people's behaviors. Well, I don't see how she can qualify for the ministry because she's a heart. But God knows the heart. So I thank God. God's in charge, don't you? All right. So I hope that answered that question. Yes, sir. It's a good start.
They thought, the apostles mistakenly thought that Jesus was going to physically rescue them from Roman oppression.
Right.
So
Wilt thou at this time reestablish the kingdom?
that's what Peter was trying to do.
Well, he was trying to incite a revolution. You're exactly right.
Right, and that messed him up. He didn't understand the spiritual part. So
Right.
he had to go through the denial and all that. And then on the day of Pentecost, he got the understanding, and that's when he preached. from the
Excellent
Holy
point.
Spirit.
What was Peter's denial all about? It was a test. Peter's denial was a test. Peter, you're going to get so upset about the circumstances, but Satan has desired to sift you, but I have prayed for you. I didn't pray for you and your behavior. I prayed that your faith would not fail while you're going through this test. That's what tests are about, your faith not to fail. So Peter denied Jesus. After Jesus was crucified, what did Peter do? I'm going back to my old ways. I'm going fishing. And Jesus said, when he was seen by the women, he said, "Go tell my disciples and Peter." Are you getting this?
Yes.
Amen.
And so what happened? On the day of Pentecost, Peter passed the test. His faith didn't fail. He stood up and he preached boldly the gospel of the resurrection. Amen? Amen. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Ma'am.
Well, when you were talking about the sun and moon and stars, being forbidden to shine and stuff, that would affect more than the earth then, unless there was a canopy or something you put over the earth to block it so that the earth wouldn't participate in
Ms.
it.
Deborah, that's a great statement. My solution is that's why God is God and we're not. I don't know how he does it, but it says very clearly right there that none of these things were allowed to shine upon the earth. Okay? So it's a very good point. It just shows to you the greatness of God. Think about this. Think about what you're saying about the canopy. This is what came into my mind. God says we've got oceans, right? He allowed the oceans to be. But what does the Bible say? Ocean, this is the line. You can't pass this.
Yes.
So if even he can cause the water to obey and storms, how much more so everything else he created, even the cosmos. So it's a very brilliant point. It's a very excellent point. Okay? Any questions so far? Anybody learning?
Yes.
Anybody burning? Okay. Let's go to the next page, Jeremiah. It's the vision of Jeremiah, chapter 4, verse 23, King James. I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void. What does that remind you of? It reminds us of Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, Pastor. All right, good. The earth was without form and void. And notice this. And the heavens, and void, and the heavens, and they had no light. When God judged the planet that Lucifer overthrew, he just turned off all the lights. Does everybody see that? Is that used for a creative process? No, it's for punishment. The book of Amos, chapter 5, verse 10. Woe unto you, the desire of the day, who desired the day of the Lord. Now, the day of the Lord, let me explain something real quick. Anytime you read the phrase, day of the Lord, if you read the verses above it and below it, it will always show judgment. If you read in the New Testament, the day of Christ, that's referring to the rapture. The day of Christ is not the day of the Lord. Okay?
So, Pastor,
Yes.
the day of the Lord is like the Old Testament wrath of God? Would you say that?
Not necessarily the Old Testament, because we know that the day of the Lord is also coming during the time of Armageddon.
Okay.
So the day of the Lord always refers to judgment. Okay? So notice this. So the desire, okay, those who desire the day of the Lord, okay, to what end? As if for you. Okay? The day of the Lord is what? Darkness. It's judgment.
And not light.
The day of the Lord is darkness and not light. And if a man did flee from a lion and a bear met him or went in, into the house, okay? And so basically what I'm trying to say is, again, in the book of Amos, darkness is used as God showing judgment. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, the planet is in darkness. The planet has been judged by God for some kind of sin. Okay? In Genesis chapter 6 and 7, the planet is judged by God. The planet! And the whole earth became corrupt. Not just what occupied it, but the earth itself became corrupt. How does soil become corrupt?
Because the death of people in it, the blood is in there.
Okay? Spilled blood upon it. Excellent point. But the soil was becoming corrupt because hybrid seed was being planted in it, and the soil was never commissioned to bring forth hybrid seed. Levitical law says that God hates the hybrid seed.
What do you can you explain hybrid seeds?
Gene splicing. How do we get seedless watermelon? Seedless watermelons is against God's creation. We enjoy the benefits, but a seedless watermelon cannot reproduce after itself. So a hybrid seed is gene splicing. So let me. It's like, I call them messy Jews. These messianic Jews and so forth. Who? Well, we've got to celebrate the Sabbath. Well, we're Gentiles. We're not Jews. Okay. We celebrate the Lord's Day. Okay. So a hybrid seed. You have these people who call themselves messianic Jew. They're wearing cotton and flannel and mixed garments.
Yes.
If they went to have a cheeseburger, you mixed meat and milk. You can't do that. You can't store your milk with the meat. So these people who call themselves Messianic Jews, they're just practicing the parts that they want. When we went to Israel, I asked for a cheeseburger. I spoke blasphemy at Burger King. They don't sell cheeseburgers. You don't get cheeseburgers in Israel because you can't put a milk product with a meat product. It's against Levitical law. And so when you wear mixed garments, if you wear polyester and cotton, according to Levitical law, that's mixed garment. You done defiled the law. Okay? If you are a Messianic Jew or people who practice their religion and you wear a wedding band bands come from the Celtic Druids. Now you're practicing paganism. If you get a birthday cake, in the book of Exodus, it says Pharaoh had a birthday and they made him a cake. It's an Egyptian practice.
Oh, wow.
cultural sins. So if you go to Europe, if you go to Italy, it's common to have a glass of wine. You go on a date with your wife here in America and you order a glass of wine and brother, sister, blabbermouth, brother, sister, love you, sees you in public, you're having wine.
Yeah.
It's a cultural sin. Okay? So we don't do things that causes one another to stumble. That's how you handle cultural sins. So if I go to Europe, I need to understand their customs. When you go into the military, you are taught customs. Our military troops, our females who have to go to the Middle East, have to wear hijabs.
Yes.
Okay? They have to. Why? So we don't offend their culture. Now, we're in their nation, we're American citizens, but we have to abide by their cultures. So now we have our military women wearing hijabs.
Oh, wow.
Okay? Is that not true?
Yes.
Okay? Why? So we don't cause them to stumble. We're there to help you. So, where do you draw the line? You always let the Word of God be your compass. Let it be your guide stone. Okay? If the Word tells me not to cause you to stumble, then I'm going to refrain myself. Okay? I'm not going to do it in front of you. I'm not going to ask you. I'm not going to, I have people ask me, I've been asked several times, what do you think about smoking dope? Why do you think they call it dope? Well, it's legalized. Well, the Apostle Paul said, even though some things are illegal, even though some things are okay, it doesn't mean it's beneficial to me. And so when you read the effects of dope and what it does to the brain and so forth, and the schizophrenia and how it increases the crime rate and everything else, even though you can argue, well, I do it for medicinal purposes, the only time you take medicine is in your pain. You're sitting there smoking it on a Friday night. You're not in pain. Okay, if you don't have glaucoma, you don't need it. So people are saying, well, I do it because of medicinal purposes. Well, if you're in pain, okay, the doctor's prescribed it to you. But if you're not in pain and you're just doing it so you can have bragging rights, you a dope. Okay, the Apostle Paul said, even though it's allowable, doesn't mean it's beneficial for me. Okay, so it's been known to cause schizophrenia. If you ever grew up and your friends were stoners, okay, dude, somebody's watching me. What is that? Schizophrenia. Your dog just talked to me. I had a friend of mine who used to get stoned. He was my best friend. I didn't smoke. I didn't drink. He used to get stoned. He was my friend. He came to me one time and said his poodle talked to him. I would like to have been in on conversation. Okay? So just because it's legal doesn't mean it's beneficial. It's to your benefit. So you have people, they want to argue their point and so forth. Well, what do you think about it? Well, have you ever seen a retired drug dealer? No. They're either dead or in jail.
That's right, Pastor.
Have you ever seen a retired addict? No, they've either spent their whole life trying to quit what they wish they wouldn't have started, or they're dead. So why would you do smoking? Well, I do it to calm my nerves. It's a substitute for the Holy Ghost. What does the little label say on the side of your package? Warning! When you get older, you may be cool now, but you will get your own oxygen tank when you're older.
Oh, yes.
But I looked cool when I was... You can talk to some women who smoke. Hello, how are you? Whoa, man. Okay? So we don't heed the warnings because we are a society who likes to justify things. And so now with the stroke of a pen, we legalize sin. So now in Europe, we talked about this before, they're legalizing pedophilia. They have bestiality motels. Don't take my word for it. Wow. Research it. It's happening in Europe. Okay? But it's against the law. It's against our law. It's against the moral law. It's against the Torah. It's against the Bible. Man shall not lie with beast as he does with a woman. Okay? Well, the Bible doesn't say anything per se about homosexuals. It does say about sodomites.
Yes.
There are hundreds of verses about sodomites. Well, you're just on a tangent. No, I'm a Bible man. And there's a big difference. So what may be acceptable in society, okay, what was acceptable in society during the time of Noah is what caused its destruction. Right? What's acceptable in our society is leading us to the apocalypse. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Nothing's changed. We haven't learned the lesson. That's why Satan's still God of this world. That's why we need Jesus.
Amen.
because man never learns. Sir?
People are living in Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Uh-huh.
As far as I know, no one's living in Sodom or Gomorrah.
Well, that's true. They're saying that Sodom and Gomorrah, well, it's a devastated land and so forth, but it's going to bring fruition again, because they're saying part of that, and Sodom is where the Dead Sea is now. And there's a prophecy that has been fulfilled that hasn't made the Christian network scene, but in the book of Isaiah, it talks about, let us go to the house of the Lord, and that where the Dead Sea area is, that there's going to be freshwater pools with life actually in it. And since the 80s, freshwater pools have been found by the Dead Sea area where there's actually holding marine life again. And so that prophecy has slipped under the radar of Christianity. Yes, sir?
Wasn't there an archaeological dig that was done at the site where they supposedly thought Sodom and Gomorrah were? And they found actual walls, and they said that the walls of Jericho were so vast and tall that when they came down, they sank into the earth. Well,
We have actually been at Jericho, my wife and I. And when you go to see the walls of Jericho, they did not tip over. They are literally sunk into the ground. All the children of Israel did, they had a big sidewalk.
so
It was a sidewalk.
But you also have to think, but that was Sodom and Gomorrah done the same way, or was it?
I think
completely
Sodom and
obliterated?
Gomorrah was like Pompeii. Okay? Anybody know about Pompeii and the volcano Vesuvius and so forth? If you studied the history of Pompeii, Pompeii was like Sin City.
Right.
Okay? It was highly sexualized and so forth. And so God, destroyed Pompeii, but he left the evidence because of the people. Okay? So do a background of Pompeii. Okay? So what happened in Pompeii could have also happened in Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay? Not just Sodom and Gomorrah, but it says the surrounding cities. But that's where the word sodomy comes from, is from Sodom and Gomorrah. That's where that practice originated. Okay? And that was introduced by unclean spirits, which is another story within itself. So yeah, you're pretty much on the money concerning something like that. That God will leave warning signs. Let me give you, we'll close with this for today. Did anybody learn anything today?
Yes.
Okay, so it talks about in the book of Isaiah that when people are going to hell, that their smoke will come up as an everlasting monument. In the book of Isaiah, it says that there's going to be a place during the millennium where people will be able to walk by and look into hell, because it says it is set up as a memorial. And it says their smoke shall ascend forever. In order to enjoy a memorial, you have to go to it and see it. So it says there's going to be an opening, basically, and they're talking about it possibly being near the Sodom and Gomorrah era, where while we are in the millennium, somewhere on the planet, you're going to be able to walk by and look into hell, okay, where they're going to be, people are going to be in torment. It's going to be an eternal reminder that at the end of the millennium period, when the devil is loosed again, this is the punishment still in operation. This is why God is allowing the devil, okay, to show that mankind, okay, has a tendency towards evil. Yes? Anybody else? Anybody learn anything?
Yes.
Questions, comments, smart remarks? Well, thank you guys for coming out. Let's shift over. Anybody seeing any prophetic updates in the news?